All right. So I'm still in my second layer here, my refined paint layer. Remember, it's just two layers. I have my base color, and then I have my refined paint. Underneath my base color, I started with like a shape paint layer, right? But I incorporated that into my base color. So when I put them all together, it's fully filled in. Now, before I continue to go away from just the focal points, which are the expression in the face, right? To get to the rest of the body, I might want to like flatten it, keep it all together. So how do I do that? Well, this shape base or the shape sketch underneath, that kind of gives me the edges that I can build up on, right? So I'm going to leave that layer on just so that there's not gray coming through everything. You see? So if I want the gray, I actually have to paint it in. And then I don't want my linear sketch anymore. And then this reference, I just want to put somewhere where it's useful. But then I got to lock it so I don't accidentally paint on that layer. I'm going to make this full screen, and I'm just going to stay on my brush tool and then just have my finger hover over Option. So as I steal colors, I can immediately steal the colors that are made when I overlap the colors. And get that combination color to help blend. So I get the shading around the whiskers here. Kind of bringing in those different tones. And animals are fun because they're fairly forgiving. But if it's your animal, you'll know if you're kind of getting the expression right or the attitude right. And I want you to think of portraits of people that way too. You don't need to make the likeness exact for it to feel like a representation of that person. That's how caricature works. And just like I'm abstracting freely with my color selections here, you should feel free to abstract completely with your choices. So about these little flyaway whiskers, I can paint them in, then I just paint around them to thin them out. All of it creates a more interesting paint surface. So I've been talking a lot about kind of the paint surface, the texture. And that's because when you print these, you don't want them to just look like MS Paint kind of sponge paintings, right? And so this is what the base paint looks like. It's just very, very obvious when you print it. And it's just pixels being filled up with a textured brush. But when you add that refined paint to it, which on its own just looks like this, right? Very watercolory, very kind of blended with itself just because it's at a lower opacity. When they come together, you get these kind of blended illusions. And it depends how much you want to really work it up. Because obviously you can spend a lot of time on digital painting and try to pay attention to every detail. But I try to zoom out quite a bit, not work too zoomed in, so that I don't get in that trap of having like hunched shoulders and being really tight with how I paint. So refined painting is all about painting something and then painting over it. And by doing that, you're kind of smoothing things and creating new textures, new colors to then steal from and paint over again. To restate. Make sure you're controlling those brush settings. So the teeth in the mouth are a bit of a focal point, so I'm just zeroing in on those a little bit, kind of modeling them, finding the shadows. All right. I'm just going to work around some of these whiskers, thin them out. Using complementary colors can work really well, like the orange and the blue, greens and reds. And when something looks too flat and boring, just bring in some saturated color and start mixing it into your colors. So I'm going to take my brush a little bit smaller just to get these whiskers, just to kind of state them a little bit. Okay, then when you feel you can move beyond the focal point, though it can be hard because you can get kind of obsessive, or I can. Then we want to look at the whole of the composition and bring that same sort of energy and use of edge and color to it. But we don't want to have to be as fussy with everything because these aren't, the rest of the body isn't as much of the focal point. So one trick is to use the navigator. So So use Window Navigator. And that's going to show you the whole picture. It allows you to kind of move around very easily without having to hit spacebar or anything else. And now we start tackling the rest of it outside of those primary focal points, especially areas that just feel flat. So far, I've really only tackled that with my refined paint. And there's a lot more that needs to be tackled, right? So I'm going to increase my brush size about double. I'm going to try to keep the energy. Maybe even zoom out a little bit. There's not a whole lot from my reference that helps. I get to kind of invent this texture because the reference is so blurry of this pose, but I love the energy of the pose. And this is what I'm doing. Painting lighter shapes and then painting over them with darker shapes, all at this lower opacity. Mostly stealing colors from myself now. If I feel like new colors need to be brought in, I can always take them from the color selector. Throw them in. And then because it's only at 60% or so, or 53% I guess for me, those colors then make new colors, and then I can use those new colors and then paint with those, and those make new colors. You get it. It's also where I can make clearer decisions about the edges of things, like where is the edge of this cat's back? Now, I don't like to erase with the brush, which means I don't like to paint around the outside or to use the eraser, because that takes time and away from the energy of the actual painting. And because we're not painting backgrounds, we just want it to be cleanly kind of cut out from the background. So what I do instead is I might take my lasso, and once I find that shape, I just kind of cut the brush strokes, delete them, and then I can move that down through the layers, right? But then lock every layer again, so that now I can keep refined painting and know what I'm tackling. My cat has, even though he's a tuxedo cat, he's got this kind of the stray white hairs in his black areas. And that's kind of just how all your colored brush strokes are. Oh, cool. Yeah, there are some beautiful colors that happen in nature. And then we can just bring them out even more, right? So got all these weird muddy colors in the black. But that makes for a much more interesting paint surface than just solid colors.